Hello and welcome to the Herdline Podcast, hosted by Trace Johnson and the Herds Headset. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode where the Headset and Trace talk all things Marshall athletics. Be sure to follow us on X and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Now, sit back, relax, and let's talk the herd.
Welcome back to the Herdline Podcast. Trace and the Herds Headset with you. We are joined by a very special guest in former Marshall head football coach, college football Hall of Famer, and just simply one of the best coaches that Marshall has ever seen in its history, Jim Donnan. We are thrilled to have him on here. Very thankful that he reached out to try to give us really kind words about our episode that we did on his tenure at Marshall. And we're just very pumped about this episode. We look forward to asking a lot of good questions and getting a conversation to give some Herd fans some more insight on certain things from that era, the era that really started the Marshall 90s dynasty. That was the era that started it. So we're very thrilled to have Jim on here today. So, Coach, how's it been going for you?
Hey, go Herd. Hey, let me tell you, it's been going good, and had a few setbacks in my health the last couple of years that kind of put me behind the eight ball, and I lost my wife to cancer, and but you know I've kind of fought back from it, and I've got this mysterious disease called myasthenia gravis, which basically controls your muscles, and you don't get enough protein in it. But I've got some good help down here and some good doctors. Cut back on my tennis and golf and everything, but other than that, But I did want to say from the get-go that from my family and myself and all the people that I know that have listened to this, just a tremendous job you guys did portraying what happened there at Marshall when we were there and what we tried to accomplish. And my main reason for reaching out to you was just to say thanks for a job well done. But any way I can help by doing this, I'd love to do it. But I want to make sure I give a lot of thanks to everybody involved because couldn't done it without everybody.
Absolutely. And we're just so thrilled, so honored to have you on here. And it's just so cool, just so out of the blue. Like I did not expect you to reach out to us. I was so happy about it. And I know that we even before you did that, to be perfectly honest, we said, man, it would be awesome if we could get him on an episode. and it worked out. It worked out. And, we're very excited about it. We'll just kind of alternate back and forth with some questions. Headset will ask his question, then I'll go and so forth. And we really are interested to hear your perspective on a lot of things because there's a lot of this stuff that, a lot of our era fans probably don't know a whole lot about. So we're excited to kind of get into that and just hear some really good stories and really good information from, like you said, sure, the era that started the dynasty. So we're excited to get into it. So we'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to the headset. He can ask his first question.
Yeah, so just to echo what Trace said a moment ago, Coach, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and out of your day just to sit down and talk with us. It means a lot to us. We really appreciate it because we know that you didn't have to, and so it really means a lot to us. But I'll just jump right into things here. My first question is this. So when you arrived at Marshall, you inherited a place that had a tremendous amount of history. Of course, the plane crash, there was a lot of setbacks with that. And then right before you came, there was some success that was starting to kind of take shape, but not the consistency overall. So, you come in and things, start to go in the right direction, lots of wins. And years later, people don't just remember the wins. They remember overall the cultural shift that kind of happened with Marshall. So looking back now with, decades of perspective, what did you identify immediately that had to change when you took the job here at Marshall? Not just talking about schemes and X's and O's, but the DNA of the program and the habits, the standards, the beliefs that you felt were absolutely necessary before you could ever build a championship level program.
Well, the first thing, from my perspective, I was really in a good situation at Oklahoma. I mean, we had it rolling there, won a lot of games, and had a good family life from standpoint. My son was in high school, and I was getting to watch him play, and, we had a good team. But Coach Switzer made a lifestyle change and decided to retire. And, rightfully so. They hired Gary Gibbs, the defensive coordinator. But I was in a position there where I felt like I needed to go ahead and try to reach out and get a really good job. And from my standpoint, I turned down some jobs mainly because we were rolling so good at Oklahoma. But when the Marshall job came open, I knew the potential there, looking at what Coach Chomp had done and doing a little research. I knew that Lee Moon was the athletic director, who was a guy I knew previously from back when I was in school. I'd known him a little bit, when he was in college too. So, and crossed paths over the years when he was an assistant coach at Virginia. So what I had to do was, get in the mix there. So I called a few markers in and got an interview up there. And once I got there, everything was going good till we went over to the stadium and I saw Fairfield. And they hadn't told me at that point that the new stadium was in the mix. And my wife was with me, and automatically, she was looking around and she was saying, "Hey, what do you think?" I said, "I'm not sure about this." And about that time, the assistant athletic director that was showing us around, Jack Daniels, said, "I did this on purpose because I want to let you know how bad things are, but how good things are going to be." And then he rolled out that model of the new stadium. And I said, "Well, sure. I mean, the check's in the mail. When's that going to be ready? 10 years from now?" Like that. And he said, "No, we've got this way we're going to build it. We're going to prefab everything. It'll be ready in 1991. And, and he showed me all the plans and everything. And then I started looking at the roster of the team, and, I liked the potential. And but the real issue that got me over the top, they had me come in for a basketball game, and I met the president, and I also met so many of the big green people that were behind the program, and saw the energy and enthusiasm that they had, and the potential, because you always got to have a way to build a program if you're going to start, trying to go 1A, which that was the plan that they were trying to get me to understand. So with that backdrop, I got into a situation where I've never been involved in that many interviews. Interviewed with the head coach, the president, the big green board, or something else, the athletic board. I mean, everybody, and they were very thorough about who they were looking at. But I really think the thing that got me over the top, and this is no brag, it's just fact. They said, one guy asked me, said, "What do you think the other coaches in the Southern Conference think about you taking this job?" And I don't know what it was. It must have been divine intervention or what. But I pointed right at him. I said, "They are scared to death, every one of them, that I'm going to get this job." And it came across pretty good. Maybe a little cocky, but at the same time that I had pretty good name recognition, and I'd done well recruiting in North Carolina, and I knew the area, and obviously you got to get players. I mean, the players did so much for us, but just as an overview, I saw a lot of potential, and I saw a community that was so behind, and I found that out as soon as I got going, that wanted it so bad, with all the tragedy and the things that had happened to the program, and the way they were starting to get a little bit of success, and the way they were really relying on football to help the whole athletic program come back. So, there's a lot of difference between performance and potential. I mean, everybody knows that. But I really thought the potential was there. And I felt like that I could get a good staff to come with me, and I could, we had, any job has to have a lot of ingredients, but I thought that was certainly there for us. And so I was really excited when they offered me the job about 3 days later. And before you knew it, I was up there with my staff, and we were rolling.
It's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. A great introduction there to the herd for sure. They didn't want any of you all after you all took off. They didn't. I know there's no way they wanted any of that. Right. No way. So my first question is a little kind of sort of tied into that a little bit, but it's a little bit different as well. So obviously you end up getting the job, you talk to them and everything, you get the job. Was that your first introduction to Marshall? What was your first introduction to Marshall? It could be as just a fan, as an assistant, whatever the case is. What was your very first introduction to Marshall?
The only thing that I'd ever known before I did the research. Once I became a candidate, was the situation when the plane crash happened. I remember when I was playing freshman football. Coaching freshman football at NC State when it happened, and everybody remembers certain things in their life, and particularly it resonated with me a little bit more because East Carolina was just so close to where we were. We were in Raleigh, and so that was my first really knowledge of Marshall as far as somebody that hadn't been around there. But I think it just from the get-go, it's so important that the fans that are listening to us and you've certainly got a good base. But I've coached a lot of places. I mean, I've been fortunate to coach at Oklahoma, North Carolina, the head coach at Georgia, but never anywhere where the program meant more to the fans than Marshall. And people know me. I'm not going to BS about that. It just was their team. It's no question about it. The identity that you associated with the area. And certainly we had to compete with WVU, and it was a lot different kind of situation that when we first started out, because we're trying to get a different maybe style of player than they were, but we occasionally got some from them. But boy, the identity that the people associated with in the Huntington and the whole community there and throughout the state, it was and the welcome we got from the high school coaches. We started things like football camp and coaches clinic. Rich Rodriguez was coaching up at Glenville, and he came down to our, I knew him when he had holes in his shoes, man. He was just a split back beer guy, and he was running all that stuff. And we had so much fun at those clinics talking ball with those coaches. And our first football camp, we had Bubby Brister in there from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was a quarterback for Chris Selfo at Southwest Louisiana or Southeast Louisiana or where it was. And we thought that'd be a name to attract some players. And we got a few people in there, but it's the first camp we ever had. And the first day we were there on registration, we were up there around the place where we're getting the kids to come in and at their dorm, and it was raining. And this Barney Fife type cop was out there giving tickets to people because they were parking in a no parking zone, but they were trying to register for my dang camp. And so I finally called up the president. And I said, look, a lot of these kids are going to be coming to college here. They're not going to come here to play football. And he came over and tore up all the tickets. But that really let me know that I had everybody behind me when the president did that.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. That is funny. Coach, listen, I got another question here for you, but you mentioned a moment ago in that first question you answered about the transition kind of from Fairfield Stadium to Jones C. Edwards Stadium. So it's a fascinating time really for the city of Huntington, for Marshall University in total. Fairfield, of course, it had its problems, but it also was a place where just a lot of memories overall for fans, just multiple memory after memory. I can remember my dad, he's been a Marshall fan ever since he was just a kid. And I think he's about in the 5th grade when the plane crash happened. And he tells me all these stories about, what happened over at Old Fairfield Stadium. But then transitioning to the Joan, obviously a much better facility and different things like that. So when you made that transition, tell me what it felt like at the university from the top down, just from leadership, also just the fan base overall, and just the excitement of that, because obviously it's not every day you get a new football stadium. So tell me a little bit about how that felt.
Well, first of all, that, over at Fairfield, it was an advantage. I mean, the fans were right on top of the other team, and they were all over. And we had some really big wins that first year. We beat Furman, who had never beaten them forever, in a big upset. And we should have beaten Georgia Southern, who ended up winning the national championship. But they had their own referees. They were in a situation where they were in a conference deal. They were non-conference then. They weren't in the Southern Conference, and they had a group of independent refs that called their games, and depending on whether they were home or away. And when they were away, they had the independent refs, and they call in the graphs twice on their quarterback, which is a pro call. But that's neither near nor there. And then we should have beaten. We lost to they called us for a guy offside against Eastern Kentucky, who was ranked in the top 2 or 3 at the time. So that had been 2 big wins. And then we had a big linebacker intercept a pass almost against Chattanooga on the last series. It kept them from scoring, and they dropped it, and they went in and scored. We get those 3, we're in the playoffs. But that's immaterial. But I will say this about the stadium. There was a lot of planning and a lot of big support throughout the state. But once we started getting close to the end, there were some issues there. We were trying to get the facilities building at the end of the stadium. We're trying to sell the sky boxes, up there. And when I got there, they'd only sold a half of one. That was all we'd had. None of them had been committed to. And so the guy that really jump-started everything for me there was Marshall Reynolds, who tremendous supporter of the whole Huntington community and all that. And he kind of took a liking to me. He loved sports, and we started talking about the issues. And one day he said, "Come on with me." He said, "We're going down to the bank." And this is something that nobody's ever heard, I don't believe, here. So we might as well get it all out there. So we're going down there, and I go in this bank, and all the bankers from all around the community are there. I mean, including people over in Ironton and over there in Asheville, every place. And so Reynolds just stands up and said, "Hey, we need to get behind this, and we need some of you to jump on board and get your friends and all. We got to sell out these boxes here today." I said, "Today?" in my mind. He said, "We got to sell out these boxes, and we got to get this facilities building. We got to get a bond situation going for this facilities building where we can get it rolling." And within an hour, we had the commitments for the bonds, and we had people that had committed that they were going to really work hard on selling the other. And so within about 45 days, we had all the different boxes sold too. So what a day that was. When I called the athletic director and told him, I thought he was going to pass out. He thought it was April Fool's. And but when we got that, we knew that the building was so critical. As both of you know, facilities are a big part of what kids are looking for. They want to go where they can lift weights, and certainly Marshall's upgraded his facilities with their indoor and all that stuff they have. But we were over there dressing at the old dressing in the basketball arena, which wasn't that old, but that's where everything was, and lifting weights over there. And we used to have kids in for official visits, and we'd get them go out there and play basketball and watch them practice a little bit from upstairs to see how they looked. It's kind of a tryout. And Troy Brown couldn't play basketball, but he could sure play football. But the reality is, that's a long question and answer, but that really jump-started us there, that part there, getting that. You knew you could show the kids, this is where you're going to have a great locker room, a training room facility. And that really got us going. And then the other thing I want to mention before I forget it is we had an unbelievable quarterback club. I mean, it was a sub situation where they worked all for football and raised money for us. And we had a guy named John Justice, his wife was my secretary, who's all-time secretary, Edna Justice. Just could do anything. But John, if we needed a project to help us get something, he would get on it. And we had a lot of people helping him. Mark George now is the president. He does a great job too. But that quarterback club, we met every Thursday, during the season at lunchtime down at the hotel. And I told him I wanted to change the menu because I didn't want to have meatloaf every time. So we changed the meatloaf. And they kidded me about that, but that's a little funny thing about it. But anyhow, that quarterback club was awesome. And we also started a deal called the Herd Sideliners, which is some ladies in the community that were either widowed or divorced or retired that had some background in teaching or whatever it might be. But they were able to help us tutor our players. We didn't have a lot of money to pay for tutors. So these elderly women would come over and help them, with their math or whatever it was. And they would have a different kind of, we'd have a big thing out there in the parking lot and sell old things and try to rummage sell. And we got some computers for the athletic department there one weekend, which, you just don't take that for granted. You got to have tutoring, you got to have computers. But the biggest thing they did, they volunteered time and would come over there and work for us, send out recruiting letters, help Edna with her job. She was the only secretary for 7 coaches and everybody else. And so that Herd Sideliners and the Big Green Club, of course, the Big Green, but also the quarterback club, just unbelievable.
Yeah, and I said this last week whenever we're going through your legacy and different things, that transition from Fairfield over to the Joan is almost like a shedding of skin, and no more would we ever really see Marshall football in the same light, because, I mean, there had been success, but, your teams, your staff, your players were able to literally bring us to a brand new level. And so I'm sure it was exciting times. I wasn't alive yet, but I'm sure it was.
You're exactly right. And as all the people are listening know, morale is so a key ingredient for anything, regardless what you're doing. If you feel good about yourself, you got a pretty good chance, and I think that's what really kind of got our players going. And is the fact that they knew that I'd had a chance to be in the larger programs and play for the national championship, and the direction that we wanted to do was kind of modeling some of the things that we did at OU. And so the fact that we were going to get this kind of weight room, and that we were working hard on getting a Nike contract and a television contract, which was kind of, whistling Dixie. Somebody say, hey, you're not going to get that at Marshall. And, realistically, it was a tough sell to get Nike. But once we started playing on television every week, which that's what we did, Dan Shoemaker and people like Keith Morehouse and, really helped us get that television deal where we played every week, and we didn't make a lot of money on it. But the whole point was we were in Washington, D.C. on their cable, Pittsburgh and their cable, down into Georgia. And what happens, these high school players are seeing you play every week because there weren't that many games on then. And so we were getting that kind of exposure. It helped our recruiting. And then once Nike saw we were on that many times, we were able to get some Nike shoes. But the first Nike shoes we got were not the real deals from the standpoint they didn't have that green swoosh on them. They were like retards from everybody else, and we had to paint over them and put the green on it. But we took them because it looked like they were brand new, which they were. We just had to paint over them. So our coaches and trainers and all got down there and painted 600 pair. But our kids really liked having those Nike shoes.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, that would have been a big deal at that point for sure. And it's great to hear those stories about how, everybody was really rallying around the program, trying to get things moving. That's awesome stuff right there. So my next question is kind of it's pretty much a two-parter. So looking at, you talked about the 90 season a little bit where you all were really close to breaking through. So the 91 season, you all definitely broke through, got all the way to the title game before eventually losing a close game to Youngstown. And then, of course, we know what happened the next year, turning around and getting Youngstown back at home in 92 and beating them. So at that point, what was the mindset of your team after the 91 season? That's my first part of the question. The second part of the question is did you understand at the time what that title in 92 truly meant to the program and the community?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you had to, because how much it let them down when we didn't win 91. But also wanted to mention Dave Weekly on that TV deal. He did a heck of a job with me. We had a TV show over in that we filmed over in every week at his studio over in Charleston. But the reality was 91 was a good year. I mean, we were right on the cuffs, and there's a real fine line between getting over the hump. The headset was asking about some of that too. So, you've got to. Sometimes you got to learn from your mistakes and understand them, and you got to win the games that you're supposed to win. And there's got to be a sense of not here we go again, when the clutch is on, instead of say, hey, we expect to win, no matter what, it's not going to enter our mind. And we kind of got that mindset after, a little bit of 91, but we knew we were right on the door and we could do it. And realistically, we got a really bad call down there. And I'm not one to bitch about the calls. There's nothing you can do about it because I've had my fair share of good ones. But the main thing was in that game that Glenn Pedro blocked the guy on the goal line. He dove at him to try to get him from coming through the A gap, and he knocked the guy down. And the referee only saw the guy laying on the ground with Glenn on top of him diving at him. He called him for holding. We lost that touchdown, and they came back and beat us, and we dropped the pass. But it's still. We played them 3 times, and the best team won. One time. I think the other 2 times the best team didn't win. I don't know that we were the best team in '92, but we were the best team in '91 and '93. '93, I'll talk about that in a minute. But seriously, when you look at it, I was so blessed to be involved at Oklahoma and Marshall, where over a 10-year run, we played for the national championship 7 times, either, in some form or fashion. At Oklahoma, we played for it twice. And at Marshall, we got to the semifinals that one year, 95, we got to the finals, 94 to semifinals. But that's a pretty good run there playing in the big time. But we were ready in '92, and we were starting to get some really good players in there that believed in what we're doing, and the carryover of the knowledge of winning and the youth that we brought in to supplement that for depth really started to make a difference. And they liked our system. We were running the pro system, and Michael Payton was really good at doing things, even though he got hurt in '92 against Middle Tennessee, and my son Todd had to come in there and play and did a great job. But '92 was just unbelievable win because, we were so far ahead, and it looked like we were doing the same thing we did the year before when we were ahead down at Savannah, Statesboro. So don't want to ramble on each game, but if you want to go through every game we ever played at Marshall, I can tell you exactly what happened. Because I've got photographic memory on that part because it's such a great memory and because little things that made the difference for us. But our fan base was incredible. Beside the fact we had the TV, we set the record for the most 1AA people every year. I mean, they were stacked in there, and it was a hot ticket to get. I mean, people wanted to go. They wanted to be on the sideline. They wanted to be part of the program. We had people volunteering things like in the spring when we had the spring game, or in the summer, we had people like Johnny Jones and them bringing us watermelon there after practice. I mean, we had unbelievable morale for our team.
And that's the beauty of being at Marshall, because, you mentioned it, it, because nothing else, everything in the city of Huntington revolves around the university. Nothing else matters more than what our sports teams do. So it's really interesting because, like, in the modern day and age of college football, where people are just so fixated on money and different things, like those little things, like just bringing watermelon to the guys after practice, that is like almost unheard of today. So that's really kind of a cool perspective.
Yeah, it was kind of a tradition that at the end of fall camp, before we started, they would bring the watermelon down there. That signified it. And then the herd sideliners, they'd bring cookies, and those little things add up and good morale. And then a guy like Buddy Logan, another great booster, they would help us out over Thanksgiving, help donate. Our team would be in the playoffs, so our kids wouldn't be off at home, and we'd have turkey dinners over there, and the herd sideliners would cook for us. I mean, it's good morale and good family situation. And I never forget 2 of my linemen came up to me because I told the team there in '92, I said, we're going to play here, but you can't go home. We got to stay here. I want everybody focused, because we didn't win it last year. And these 2 guys came up to my office. And when players come up to your office, really, it's usually not because they want to see how you're doing. You think something's happening, been in a fight or something like that. And they both country boys, I won't say who they were, but it said, Coach, he said, we always been hunting on Thursdays and Thanksgiving. And we won't tell anybody. If you let us go hunting, it really would help me. And so I was so glad they weren't in trouble. I said, go ahead. You can just be back. It was cool.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
But, one thing with 92 too was we lost the game to Appalachian State. It just still chaps my ass because it was the first game we lost in the stadium. We didn't lose many, but we had them beat and got a couple bad calls there too. But at the same time, we still had the game won. And then one of our defensive backs had an interception there with like 15 seconds to go, went right through his hands and hit his face mask, bounced up, and they caught it, and they went down and kicked the field goal and beat us, I think, 27-24. And as y'all alluded to, quite right, we had a nemesis with Appy. I mean, we beat them 50-0. We beat them 37-3, but we lost some games to them that, particularly 94, we played in that fog bowl because of TV. We're supposed to play at 1 o'clock, and they moved it up to 7. And by the time we played, you couldn't even see the other sideline. And we were passing team, and we had a terrible game against them. And but that's a fond memory of 92. But Appalachian really chaps my ass on that.
Well, we still don't like them that much today either.
Jerry Moore, and I was happy for him and his wife Margaret that they were on, moving forward there in the early 2000s. They really got it going there and got it rolling there at Appy and won a couple of them and beat Michigan, did all those things that we wanted to do. We had NC State beat, in 91, and they, I kidded the people because I was a state graduate. I said, you'd think that an engineering school could get the scoreboard to run. The last minute, they didn't even have the scoreboard on, and they ran like 18 plays in a minute and 10 seconds. So I don't know how to get it, but all of Mark's fans remember that would have been really something to beat NC State, coming around like that. But we didn't have much success against the D1 teams. They're all money games, and, we had to have them for the athletic department. But we lost 19 games, and 4 of them were to 1A schools. So probably shouldn't have played them, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had a couple really close ones there with NC State in particular. I remember looking, but
definitely.
Yeah, definitely. You alluded this a second ago, but you were able to coach tremendous amounts of talented individuals. Whenever we think about Marshall legends, you have to think about Troy Brown, you have to think about Mike Bartram, Michael Payton, and so on. And I just wanted to ask you, can you tell me some of your more favorite players that you coach? Not necessarily even the best players that you coach, but just some of those guys that you still think about today just that kind of stood out. Maybe didn't even see the field, but just were those hustle players. You know what I mean? Tell us a little bit about some of those special guys that you had here at Marshall.
It'd be really hard for me to single out anybody and not leave somebody out because we had a good player-coach relationship. And the one thing that really stood out that kind of set our program going, we had a guy from Ironton that went to the West Point, and after a year he left. His name was J.D. Kaufman, and he came to our school in 91, and he had to sit out a year being supposedly from, but I don't really think he had to, but for some reason, because he's from West Point, he couldn't play. He came there too late or what, I don't know. But so he was an offensive lineman for the scout team. And during the week there, about the 4th week of the season, he got sick. And, we didn't think anything about it. And then the trainer called me that night and said they put JD in the hospital. And 2 days later, he had this mysterious illness and passed away. And it was just such a tremendous jolt to all of us. If you can think of an athletic team that loses one of your players, one of your brothers, that one day you're practicing with him and the next day he's gone. Yeah. And it was just, I didn't really know what to do. I called the pastor and some people on campus, and we got over there at right there in the chapel, and I had the team, and I was just, of all the things I've ever done, it was the hardest in front of the whole team having to talk about this because I was at a loss to try to understand, the grief that all of us had. And all of a sudden, one of our players in the back started walking to the front. And he kept coming up there and he said, Coach, I'll need to talk to the team. And he gets right up there in front of him. He said, I'm the captain of this team and I'm a defensive back, but I didn't even know this guy. He said he was number 76, but he was on the scout team. He's just a number. Can you imagine me being on the team and not even knowing the guy? He said, what kind of team do we have? We got our own groups. We got our own cliques. He said, from this day forward, we're going to work hard at knowing who everybody is, managers, trainers, everything like that. And I kind of thought, from a connectivity standpoint that we did know that. But here he is right there in front of everybody just laying his heart out. And, boy, I tell you, talk about, that tragedy brought everybody even closer together and played even harder, and they still give an award for J.D. Kaufman for the outstanding scout team player or whatever it might be, which he should have. But that little deal right there became a monster deal for us. And so he's a favorite of mine for a lot of reasons, but just because what he laid on the line for Marshall. And then when we got the 92 championship, we had to get some rings. We wanted to get a big ring for everybody, but we didn't have any budget for that. So we had a really big get together over there at the Civic Center. And, people paid a lot of money for the tables and all. And with that in line, again, Marshall Reynolds helped us get that rolling too. We got all these beautiful rings for everybody. And one of the things we had was you had the seniors get up and say a few words. So guys like Troy Brown and Michael Payton, a big-time player of the year and all 1AA, Troy Brown, All-American, keep going. Mike Bartram, we had Phil Rattler was All-American. We had all these guys, and this one guy gets up that nobody really could react to, and he said, most of you don't know me. He said, my name's in the program, my picture's in the program. And part of you probably want to hear these other guys, but I want to tell you, I was on this team. I was a part of this team. What I did was I ran the other team's plays. I did everything Coach asked me to, and I'm just as big a part of this team as anybody else, and I'll take it with me the rest of my life playing for Marshall football.
Yep.
And those two things to me right there kind of signify what everything was all about for us. The fact that we came together and that everybody knew their role and there weren't a bunch of big time prima donnas. You know what I mean? Everybody had a role and it worked out pretty good.
I'd say it worked out amazingly. That is an awesome story. That is so cool. That is the definition of a team right there. It doesn't get much better than that. But speaking a little bit about talking about some players and certain things, I could not talk to you on here if I did not ask you about what did you think when you were recruiting Chad Pennington? What did you honestly think about him at that point?
Well, the first thing we did was we tried to hide him out because we knew he had something there. We came up there in the 10th grade. He had an uncle that lived across the river there and that had some relationship with him. He was there in the 10th grade, and we're just saying, look, this guy can play right now. But he's kind of gangly, but, he was ready to go. And I told him, I said, hey, Chad, we're going to offer you a scholarship right now, which that was very seldom I would ever do that, for a 10th grader. But I said, and it'll be your team because, at that point, my son will be graduating and you'll be a freshman and you'll be our quarterback. We might have another guy that you'll have to beat out, but you'll be ready to go. But you got to understand all these other schools are going to start coming at you. And I think probably a lot of 1A schools. And so I was pretty candid with him and we just stayed on top of everything and got in tight with his mother. And I don't know what the guy over in across the river was doing for him, and I didn't want to find out, but it was good, that's for sure. And anyhow, when push came to shove, I went up there to the Webb School his senior year, right after the season, in Tennessee, and some of them started to jump on him. And I said, Chad, I said, I can't blame you if you take something like that, but you're just going to have to really be part of you're just going to be a number in a place like that. You're going to be the man for us, and we want you. And we put our whole program where we hadn't recruited another quarterback really, but maybe one more since you were there a sophomore year, and he stuck with us, and the rest is history. I mean, he came in there his freshman year, and he was ready to go. But as you guys really did a good job explaining, we had Larry Harris, who was a good multi-purpose guy, hurt his knee against Tennessee Tech. And then Mark Zaban came in there, who was a Huntington guy that I tried to get out of high school, but similar situation there. But Ohio State slipped in there and took him at the last minute, and he went up there, and then he transferred. And he was ready to go, and we were playing Georgia Southern, and he got hurt. So we had to put Chad in, and I was talking to the coaches. There was a timeout there, and they said, let's let him get going here. I said, heck with that. I said, we're going with counter pass right, get him rolling. He rolled out and faked inside, faked outside, and rolled out and hit a guy coming across the middle, and the rest is history. Except we won that game, and then the next week we had to go down and play Chattanooga, which everybody in the stadium was from Knoxville, from his hometown. I mean, he must have had 500 people there at that game. And he was doing a good job of completing passes. The problem was the other team. He was hitting the other team so bad. And I said, hey, Chad, you just got to – if you'll just take the snap and hand it off, we can win the game. But you keep throwing the ball to their team, we're going to lose. I wasn't being sarcastic. I said, we got to hit our guys. And I'll be dang if the first play when he go out there, he's already thrown about 4 picks. He goes out there, and they got an all-out blitz going. I said, hey, Chad, we just need to run the ball in there. He checks off to a pass, which this is a freshman in college that had just got chewed out by his coach about throwing interceptions, and threw the ball out there and hit a big completion. And I knew we had something there, but just the fact that he had that much moxie about him and believed in himself. And the other story was we're getting ready to go down to play our road game against McNeese State before the championship game in '95. And they were, had a terrific following down there, and it's a tough, tough place to play. And we were practicing all week, and Chad could not throw the ball in the ocean from a rowboat all week. I mean, he was terrible. And I mean, just, he was feeling the pressure a little bit. And so I called him over. I said, hey, Chad. And basically, I said, I know there's a lot of pressure on you and all that. I said, but if you're going to play like this, we can't afford for you to play like you did against Chattanooga now. You're going to have to pick it up. But I'm just telling you right now, if you start out like this, I want you to be relaxed and everything. But I'm not going to go with you through hell or high water now. I said, we're going to be ready to go with somebody else. I'm just telling you right now. He said, I'll be ready, Coach. I'll be ready. And we had a guy named William Pennell, who was a left tackle for us that we got out of Virginia, big old boy, just country boy, good offensive tackle. And they had a first-round draft choice playing defensive end that went to the Cowboys, that probably one of the best defensive players we ever played against. And William Pennell put the quietus on that guy. He didn't even sniff Chad the whole day. And he had a good game, and we ended up winning. And then we ended up going against Montana and had them down, and they came back and kicked the field goal on us.
It's awesome. That's a great story, Chad. I mean, just the fact of what his progression and the development he made with Marshall, starting with you, and just where he ended up getting was quite a sight for sure. I mean, just a legend of all legends for Marshall football, no doubt about it.
Yeah, very smart. But I told Chad, I said, anybody can be. When I saw him at the College Football Hall of Fame when he was getting honored for postgraduate scholarship or something like that, I said, hey, Chad, I'm not going to tell him you know the difference between 48 and 49 that one game where he turned the wrong way. And I said, they will never know that. We started laughing, but it was
yeah.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks at Marshall, I don't think that we would be able to do this justice if we didn't talk about your son. Todd Donnan is one of, tragically, kind of the more forgotten about quarterbacks. But man, when you look at what he did, the success that he had, the wins that he had, I mean, he really is one of the all-time great quarterbacks at Marshall, and that's saying something considering it's Marshall. We've seen some good quarterbacks here.
Yeah,
So talk to me.
He had really probably better record than any of them overall, as far as I think 3 losses one year and 2 the other. We didn't have that great a game in the championship game. We couldn't do anything offensively, and then they blocked the punt on us. But like I said, he did a great job as a freshman going in there against Middle. And but the biggest thing for me in recruiting him, and I talked to his mother about it, was he was a marginal 1A player. He had some offers, but he wanted to play for me. And I told him, I said, you're going to have to be way head and shoulders above anybody else for me to start you, because I don't want, everybody knows I'm going to be fair, but I'm going to play the best guy, but you're going to have to earn it. And he came in there and, paid his dues and lived over in the dorm as one of the boys, and did everything he's supposed to do right, and did extremely well in school. And, he won those Southern Conference Student Athlete of the Year one year, and then Player of the Year a couple of years. But he was fortunate to have Chris Parker back there with him too. Now that guy can, when we had some backs, I mean, Glenn Pedro, Chris Parker, and then he had Chris Gross, who was a really good fullback. And I'm so proud of Chris. He's out there now. He's a chiropractor up in. If you'd have told me he'd been a chiropractor when he was playing fullback, I would have told you you're smoking some bad weed. But he's doing really good. He's doing really good up there in Beckley, and I'm proud of Chris. But Todd, the thing that really sticks out in my mind, when we voted for captain his senior year, he got every vote but one, and that was his vote. So it's pretty obvious that he was a team guy, and everybody around Todd knows what kind of guy he is. And he was like a coach on the field for sure, but he's a good athlete. And, he did some really good things. I remember in the game against, we played Citadel down there, and he hit like 15 in a row. I mean, Citadel couldn't rush the passer because all they did was run the wishbone, so they never practiced against the pass. But, that was something that's really stuck out about him. And, we had a big win over Eastern Kentucky to propel us into the championship game in '93. And funny story about that one, because I got to tell this one. One year we were playing Eastern Kentucky. I think it was the first year in the playoffs in '91. Brian Dowler was our punter, whose dad, Boyd Dowler, a great player for Green Bay, and Brian was a tremendous punter, but an even better receiver. But the rules were such, for you guys that weren't even born, we couldn't have but 57 players dress out. That's all they let you do for 1AA games. And the reason they did that was for travel and keep the teams down. So you couldn't have an extra punter or extra, certain players. So our backup punter was our backup field goal guy. His name was Shoda, I think his name. So we're against Eastern Kentucky, and trainer comes over and tells me, he says, "Hey, Brian can't play anymore. He had the flu, and he's just dehydrated. He doesn't have any energy. He's laying over on the table." And I'm thinking, good God, we got to punt this guy. Never punted in a game. It was cold. And so we go out there, and the first punt, there's like in the third quarter that he was in there, he punts the ball for 11 yards. 11 yards. But Fortunately, Eastern Kentucky had 12 men on the field, so it didn't count. So the rest of the game, we go for it on fourth down twice, because I don't want to punt, and we make it. But it's the end of the game, and we're backed up, and they call timeout. So I get over there and put my arm around Shoda, and I said, "Look, you don't have to worry about anything." I said, "I know that first kick wasn't great." I said, "If you'll just kick it twice as far as you did the first time, which was 22 yards, I'll be happy." And he went, "Okay, coach, okay." So he goes out there and he kicks one, and I promise you, I don't even know how it cleared the line of scrimmage. It was so low. And their guy was back there. He didn't know he wasn't very good, and their guy was back, and so he let it roll. ended up being about 40 yards. And he comes over there, and everybody on the sidelines high-fiving him and everything. So he had a great kick for us. It was amazing. So that was really awesome.
Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, that's what a little bit of motivation, a little bit of belief in the guy. That's what it can do sometimes. That's awesome right there, for
The
sure.
other story about Todd was in '94. We had that great year. I mean, we played state good. For some reason, we didn't play very good down at Furman and got beat. But we were in the semifinals. We were 11-2, and we're playing out there at Boise. But the week before, they come in the NCAA test you. They test so many players, and we had our center tested positive for marijuana, and so unfortunately, J.D. Cyrus has passed away since then. He was a great player for us, good, and he was involved in. And people do things sometimes, but that's the luck of the draw. But the guy that took his place couldn't snap the ball at all in the shotgun. Jim Lanzo, who's now a very prominent lawyer up in Ohio, and started becoming a judge, I've heard recently. But he was a good center, but he just couldn't do the deep snap. So we played Boise. We tried the first quarter or so, but he'd snap him over his head and everything else. But we had to play them without running the shotgun, which that was our bread and butter. So I'm sounding like a guy with a lot of excuses, but that was a terrible situation for us. If we could have had the shotgun, we'd have kicked their ass into submission. But we ended up losing, even though we were way ahead. And then the other game in the national championship, Madison Sayre in '91. We're getting ready. He's our left tackle, really good player now, a very prominent banker in up near the Charleston area. Just a tremendous leader for us and good player. We're doing these drills through the bags, and he tears his knee up. And so we play against Youngstown without our starting left tackle. So we can't hardly drop back at all because we don't have a lot of depth there. The guy came in and played well, but those are just two things beyond your control that can, I feel like me as a coach, I should have done better having our team ready for those kind of situations, but it still just galls me to think about what we could have done if we'd had everybody. But that's part of life. It's the other teams get injuries too, but those two things really took away from us.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, those aren't excuses. Those are very valid. That's a very valid insight that, I didn't know about for sure. So that definitely changes things for
I want
each
to say
game.
one other thing about Todd. My wife was a very good coach's wife. I mean, she did so much for our family and so much for the other kids, like mom away from home for them. And she was good in the stadium. My kids said she never said anything because people are always going to be on the coach's ass. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But I promise you, boy, they started saying something about Todd. You better watch out. She could get right into the shit. It's a little bit different being the coach's wife and the quarterback's mom. So that was pretty cool.
A whole different ball game right there. No doubt about that. So my next question would be, and you've kind of sort of alluded to a little bit of this already, but I'm curious to hear about some of who, in your opinion, are some of the coaches, some of the assistants, some of the staff members, some of the players, whoever else you want to look at involved with the program during your tenure that you want to give credit to that most fans probably wouldn't think about or know about. What are some of those people for you?
Well, first of all, we had so many people help us. Scott Reese, our strength coach, who's now lives over in Ohio and is married one of our team doctors, who's now a tremendous orthopedic surgeon, Laura, and so he did a great job. He came from Marshall with us, and he did things behind the scenes. We had good trainers and Woody Woodrum and those guys, and several of his guys have gone on to Matt Lewis as a trainer, moved on up to Iowa State now as a football ops guy at TCU. All those guys behind the scene, Jimmy Woodrum, Woody's brother, and Bill, everybody in the Woodrum family over there did so much for me around town. And then as far as our coaches, we had 4 of the original 6 become head coaches. Chris Selfo ended up being the head coach at Tulane. Mickey Matthews won the national championship at James Madison. Tim Billings went down to Southeast Missouri State. And Brad Lambert, who now is back at Marshall, got the original program going at Charlotte. They didn't give him long enough. But so 4 out of 6, that's pretty awesome right off the bat. And then Mark Gale came in there with me and stayed there forever. He was a loyal guy that did so much for Marshall. And then, Lee Moon was AD and Jack Daniels was the assistant AD. They were always behind me and helped us in so many ways. And then as far as players, I mean, good Lord, I mean, you just go through so many of them, this outstanding behind the scenes, and just a guy like Jim Donnan was a good defensive lineman for us, is now a strength coach down here, but he worked with Mickey and Brad, and his daughter getting married here in Saturday night here in Athens, and you keep up with those people. Byron Litton, a guy that played for us, good defensive lineman. I talked to him, renewed because his daughter was dating a player up in Illinois where he works that Georgia was recruiting, and we started talking and everything and the success he's had. But, I can go on and on about players, but the overview there was just that we had a good support staff. If you got, Donna was our tutoring, and then we had a Steve Fox and his brother, his brother's wife came over and helped us with the tutoring, and she was so great. Just so many people behind the scenes, but we had a lot of help, that's for sure. A lot of help.
Well, and something that really sticks out to me with all those people that you just mentioned, like so many of them are still connected to the university or living around the area, and the players, coaches, the whole nine. So that really speaks to the overall culture that you were in charge of. It's still being felt today. Like what you built is still really, that's the Marshall way. That is the blueprint for what we define success to be even today.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but certainly I got to give a lot of love to Coach Pruitt. He came in there and really solidified that team that we had coming back. They didn't lose a game for 2 years with those players, and he brought in some of his own too. And those kids knew what it was all about, and they kind of got the monkey off their back from 95 by winning that 96 against Montana. And but he did it unbelievable. And you look at the number of wins that Marshall had throughout the 90s, more than any team in the country. I'm sure we played more games, but it really is a true something you can always look back on. And Mark Snyder and all these other guys came in there and kept on going. And they always everybody's always made me feel welcome coming back there. I hadn't been able to travel like I want to since I got this illness, but nothing like I did a game there, and 4 or 5 years ago, and Aaron Ferguson was getting recognized as All-American, and I was there, and I was able to walk on the field with Fergie, and I know how proud he is of his son playing on the team now, and just a lot of guys like that just we had a reunion of some players over in Atlanta, guys that had Atlanta background, and went over there a couple years ago, and to see all those guys. But what's great about that? Anytime you go into a situation like that, and you guys are involved with sports, but when you go up to them and they still call you coach, you're their coach, you're the guy that got them going, and they believe in you, and they had something to do with them being successful early and now in life, and that's a respectful deal, and I take a lot of pride in that.
Sure, absolutely. I got just a couple more questions for you. When coaches leave a program, fans kind of often reduce the decision. It's about money, or it's about ambition, or it's just about climbing the ladder. But it's really more than that when you break it down, because all of these things that you've been talking about with us today just kind of drives home the point that there was so many relationships and so many people around you that meant a lot to you. So I say that I know that you obviously would go on to be the head coach at University of Georgia, really a once in a lifetime opportunity, and no one blames you at all for that. I mean, man, that is a fantastic feat. That's one of the best football programs in all the country. But as you were making all of those transitions, let's say that the Jim Donnan of today could simply just sit down and talk to the Jim Donnan all those years ago as you were making those plans of transitioning. What would you tell a younger version of yourself as you were on that verge of heading to Georgia?
I think first of all, I probably should have taken a head job a lot earlier than I did. I was fortunate to be involved in some very early that maybe, I should have gone on and gotten some experience. But but when I made that transition to Oklahoma, winning every game and being around my family, not having to worry about, I had two cars and a radio show as an offensive coach. Money was no object. But as far as the Marshall, Georgia thing, I was offered some pretty good jobs there at Marshall that nobody knows about, and I'm not going to get into it. But part of the reason I stayed, and the main reason I stayed, was I didn't feel like that they could do on that level what we could do at Marshall. And I was hoping that we were going to go 1A, and which they did do. And tell you how I found out about the 1A. I was playing in a golf thing up in Ohio, and back then you didn't have cell phones, so I called in the office about 10:30, and the secretary said, "Hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Dr. Gilly wants to talk to you." So I said, "Good Lord!" So I called him up, and he said, "Hey, we're going to have a press conference at 1:30 today. We're going into the Mid-American Conference." I said, "What?" And I said, "I didn't even have any clue about that." He said, "Well, it's turned around fast. Me and Moon have been talking about it. And, we mentioned it to you back to back in the spring that we were going to start talking to him." So I called up Mickey Matthews and told him to be over there just from a symbolism standpoint, that we had a football coach there. But I knew nothing about that right there, which kind of chapped my ass. I would have liked to at least known it, but I guess they figured I might have tried to talk them out of it, which I wouldn't. I'd have been okay with it. But as far as the Marshall, Oklahoma, all that stuff, the Marshall job was, people took care of me so many different ways. You can't even believe it. Financially, you couldn't even go anywhere in town to try to go out and eat. People be paying for your bill. I didn't want that, but I had so much success there that they helped me in a lot of ways to try to keep me. If somebody else came, they didn't want me to. But, I originally interviewed for the Georgia job, and then they gave it to Lynn Mason. And then he subsequently was there a week, and then he had some issues back home he was in the middle of some family situation. He decided to go back. And so Coach Dooley called me and offered me the job, and I took it. And then I went and talked to some people, and then they were going to have a private plane to bring me back, but they couldn't get the plane to go up there. So I had to fly out of Charleston like at 6:30 that morning. And I spent all night going over to different people's houses. And at about 5 o'clock before I was supposed to leave, I almost didn't get in the car to go up to there. And I went and told my wife I'm not going. And I told Todd, and he said, "You got to go." He said, "This, he said, this is like you said, it's a lifetime job." And it was hard for me to leave. I didn't want to leave, really. I knew what kind of team we had. I knew what we built. And I'm not just saying it because we're on this Marshall show. It was hard to leave. And then when I got down there, I found out that we were going on probation, which was not great. And, we had to Tennessee and Florida were at their zenith, and we had to work hard. But we did finish in the top 20 the last 4 years. But President and I never got along that great, and I turned down North Carolina State and North Carolina and Oklahoma while I was here, and had 3 years left on my contract. But he was just hard to deal with, and so realistically, when I look back on it, it would probably been a lot better just to stay at Marshall, because after I got let go here, I just felt like I didn't really want to coach anymore. I had a bad taste in my mouth, and I didn't want to start for me to get a job again, I was going to have to start at a smaller place. And I had some good offers after that, but I enjoyed being around my kids and grandkids and all that. But the Marshall job was a tremendous job. It still is. I mean, when you say Marshall football, I don't care who you are around the country, it's going to get your attention. And that's what I used to tell our players up there. And this is really important. I said, when you're going around the room there and going up and down the halls and people ask who's recruiting you, the first team you're going to say is Marshall, because that's going to get their attention. I'm talking about when we were on that level. I'm not talking about 1A, but and now it's the same thing for them on that level. Because for Marshall to be after you, they know that you're a good player. Now with its NIL and transfers and all that, recruiting quite isn't like it used to be, but it is a great program, a great, tremendous program.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you're a very, very integral part of that. I mean, of the whole process of the program getting back on its feet and taking off like it did. You were a huge part of that. And there's, I feel like we drove that point home pretty well on our episode when we talked about your tenure. I mean, that's just the facts. I mean, you did amazing work for the Herd, and like it's still being felt to this day, and all the great players. And I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at for sure. It was a great accomplishment of what went on at that time.
Right.
I guess I'll probably just ask one more question, then Headset will ask his last one. But my question is, and this is kind of a funny one, I guess, if you want to look at it. I was reading something recently that it talked about you at Georgia 1 year about the steamroller. I want to hear that story from you.
Yeah, we were in the process of trying to get things rolling at Georgia, just like we did at Marshall. We were in the second year and kind of, hey, 6-5, and then now we're trying to get it over the hump. And I was talking to our players. I said, hey, we're either going to be the steamroller or the pavement. That was what I said on Sunday. I said, hey, we're starting in the conference. We're playing Mississippi State. It's time for us to get over the hump. We can't lose these close games. So I was on the way over to the training table, and they were doing some renovation in the parking lot over there, and this guy had this steamroller out there. And I said, look, about 3:15, would you drive that up to the gate there to practice field and show me how to run it and let me just drive it in there about 100 yards? And I want to make a point with my team. He said, sure, coach, sure, we'll do it. And he showed me how to do all these levers and stuff and gears. And I told the coaches, I said, when we start stretching, I want you to put everybody's back to the gate down there. And then when I get in there and blow the whistle, when they turn around, they're going to see me on that steamroller. And sure enough, I got up there and I cranked it up and drove in there, and they were all looking down. And then I turned it around, and they looked at me, and they knew right away. The old coach was ready with his steamroller, and they came running up there, and we all kind of got around it. That wasn't the difference, but it was just a psyche of knowing that, hey, I really believe we were ready to be that. And we beat Mississippi State 47-0 that game, and just kind of had a good roll, won 10 games that year, and really, won about 15 out of 17 games there. And then a quarterback got hurt, and in '98 that hurt us a little bit. But really, just the psyche of that moment. And there was a couple stories I wanted to tell about Marshall that I think the fans would really like. That my first year we were going over, and we had these rickety ass buses. I mean, back from World War II. I mean, we're trying to save money, and I told the trainer we'd get some walkie-talkies in case something happens to one of them. And sure enough, one of them did, and they get on there and say, defensive bus is broken down here up on the interstate. So we had to go the day of the game because we couldn't stay in a hotel. We didn't have enough money. So we rode back there, and I put all the first team on and a couple of backups on the first bus, offense and defense, and the kickers. And I told Mickey Matthews, I said, hey, just get out there. There's going to be some Herd fans coming to the game. I want you to thumb and pick up everybody and just meet us over there. We had plenty of time. It's about 80 miles. So we get over there, and then here comes Mickey coming in. It's about 50 minutes before we're going to go out on the field. And I said, is everybody here? And he said, yeah. I said, the last group got in, and I got in with this guy in the last car. And I said, okay, good. So we started looking around the locker room. There's 4 guys missing. And I went over. I said, hey, I thought you said. He said, Coach, I saw him getting in the van with these guys 2 hours ago. So we went out there, and they were in the parking lot tailgating with those guys. Up now. These guys are tailgating. I said, get your ass in there and get dressed. And I told him, that's the only time I've ever had players. And so then also in 91, we had the facilities building was being built, but we couldn't dress down there. So we had to have a temporary thing there with some porta potties, and all we had was just a dressing room for both of us. And the only thing that was separating was a little curtain between the two. And so we go in there at halftime. We're playing Eastern Illinois, I think. Maybe, excuse me, I get these Northern Illinois. And so one of our linemen come up to me, and he's old country boy, and he said, Coach, are you going to run that linebacker through the B gap? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, I promise you now. And this guy, he never talked about football. You know, he knew how to block and all, but, you know, I said, why? He said, I'll tell you why. So I was sitting in there, and I was in the porta potty, and I heard the other team's coach tell him. we got a good scouting report there, because and sure enough, we were ready for it. They ran the linebacker through the big gap in the second half. But there's not many times you get your team ready by getting them, picked up on on thumbing out there on the interstate, or guys going in the porta potty. So that's pretty cool.
That's insane. That's amazing.
That's a legendary story right there. Fans are going to love that. You were right. Absolutely.
Yeah, we had an unbelievable following on the away games. So I couldn't believe it. Some of these games, Southern Conference, we had more people there than the other teams. I mean, it's incredible. Just the following we had, and we had people come out to practice, watch us practice. We had open practice, and I got to the point where I felt bad if I didn't go up in the stands and talk to them a little bit, just to thank, they just loved to watch us, and we had a good contingency of that. They weren't too much Monday morning quarterbacks or anything, but they asked me a few questions once in a while. But it was great. But that stadium was just a home field, just a nightmare for these other teams. So I mean, just herd fans, just unbelievable. You talk about people couldn't hear their count or anything. We just had a great home field advantage.
Yeah, and still do. The Joan gets rocking, and it's hard to play there whenever you're an opposing team, for sure.
Exactly.
I got one more question for you, Coach. Okay, so you helped leave behind one of the most important eras in Marshall football history. So people like to talk about legacy a lot. They usually focus on trophies and records and different things, and that always will equal to whatever that person's legacy is. But, we know that oftentimes that legacy is deeper than just wins and losses and different things like that. So when somebody says of your program that, you built there in the 90s, what would you like for them to remember about the Jim Donnan Marshall football teams more than anything else?
There's plenty of things you could talk about, but I would say that just from a perspective of, we made that jump from being right there to getting to the mountaintop, and once you get to the mountaintop, the wind blows a lot harder, and it's hard to stay up there. But I felt like we told them we were going to get there, and we stayed there, we were very consistent, and we did it by the rules, and we had so many good, I tried to mention everybody I could that supported us. Forgot Dave Hayden over there in Charleston, and Parker Ward. It's just so many people. But the main thing is, from how it's remembered to me, is just class. I think the players had dignity and class. They played. We were very good about not having a lot of penalties, and we won with class, and we knew how to act, and we had respect to the other teams, and we certainly would like to have a few more victories and a few more trophies, but I really feel like we put a lot into building that stadium, and besides just the mortar, there's a lot of hard work and souls out there on that turf, and so I would just say that we did it the right way, and we gave the people that lost so much, and in the plane crash, because so many of the people that I got to know had parents on the or sons on the, and met Red Dawson, and he helped me out a lot too, learning about the culture up there. And General Mooney was a great guy for me, just a mentor who's now passed away. But the fact that you came really from the ashes to right there to the top of the mountain. I mean, and it wasn't just Jim Donnan and a lot of people, but we had a good plan. And I always say, plan your work and work your plan. And what I envisioned Marshall being, I didn't get to do the 1A part, but what I envisioned it being when I took it, I think we came pretty close to that. And I was a lot better off being the coach at Marshall than they were having me there, though, because I got so much out of living in that town and being part of the community and talking to youth groups and civic groups. And I mean, if you're the coach at Marshall, there's the governor of the state, and there's the head coach at West Virginia, and there's the head coach at Marshall, and it's a pretty dang big deal now. And I took it with a lot of pride and no ego involved, but I promise you one thing, I busted my ass for them. I did everything I could. I lived for a year and a half without my family up there in room 214 at the hotel, and I knew all those people there. I finally talked this one maid into doing my laundry for me, but I was there for a long time, and that's a pretty big sacrifice, but it was worth it. It was worth it. And I really, I can't say enough about the relationships that we had. And I appreciate you guys letting me come on and maybe say a few things about how I've always told everybody how much it meant to me to be the coach there. And I hope I was able to get that across.
No doubt about it. You perfectly nailed it. I mean, just as eloquent as you could possibly be. I mean, I know I probably speak it for Headset as well when I say this is probably definitely our favorite conversation we've had so far on here.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you could have me on. And I think sometimes when you do a show and you do podcasts and all like you guys do, you don't realize who you're reaching sometimes. And sometimes, right. Hey, you're working at it, and it's obvious, like I told you when I called you, Trace, that the research you guys did for ours, it was, I mean, to not have seen us play, it was like you were at all the games. I mean, you just can't make that stuff up. You guys did a great job. But I do think when you have a team that you associate with, and you guys have people like you doing that, then the fan base really appreciates the fact that you're putting this kind of material out, and that's great. Don't take it for granted. People need that, and there's a lot of guys that don't know whether football's blown up or stuffed. Trying to talk in these authorities out there, but from a herd perspective, I'm sure everybody's glad y'all are doing it.
Well, thank you very much. We can't even quite put into words how much we appreciate that. I mean, that is awesome. And just the fact that, like you said before, like that you listened to the episode, that you liked it, that you said that we did a good job. I mean, that means a whole lot. I mean, it's one thing to have a couple fans say, oh, we like you, but it's different having a former guy that was in the trenches like you talking about.
Well, all the Marshall people know that I don't give any false praise. I'm not going to tell you something unless I believe it, but hopefully we'll see how things go, and maybe we can do another one of these and go over some other stories. I got so many stories I can't even remember them, but I tried to off the cuff give you a couple that maybe would be pretty good. But I will tell you one that I want to talk about a referee. We were playing Western Carolina in the playoffs up there, and this guy makes a call on short yardage, and the guy, he calls it short, that they didn't make it. They went for it in overtime, and then we ended up kicking a field goal and winning. Todd ended up throwing a pass to in the end zone to get us into overtime. We were playing, and he threw it to I can't remember who he threw it to, but Ricardo Clark. He ran the fade out on the goal line. But anyhow, this referee was a linesman, and he called Western Carolina short. and we go on to kick the field goal and go on to the next round. So as fate would have it, about 4 years later, I go over to him and I said, "You can go to your grave, Johnny, knowing that you made the right call. That guy didn't make it." He said, "Well, I'm sure you can tell me that, Coach, because I called it your way." I said, "I'm telling you, you can go to your grave." Sure enough, first game at Georgia, 1996, we're playing Southern Miss. And I look over there, and here's this guy. He's a linesman. He's moved up to the AC he went to the ACC, and then he was in the SEC from the Southern Conference. And I go over to him, and I said, "Well, you've gone to your grave, and you've come back, so it's pretty cool." He started laughing. It was kind of cool to see him calling one of our games.
Yeah, definitely. That's a nice full circle moment right there. But unless you've got anything else to add, or unless Headset's got anything else to add, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, if y'all got anything else you want to final thoughts, go ahead and go for it now.
Yeah, whatever you got there, Headset, you've done a good job on all this. And I guess I owe you. I heard you gave me an A+. I mean, that's pretty strong.
Top praise.
I did. You're my GOAT. I'm just being honest with you. You're the greatest of all time, in my opinion.
I'm just glad I didn't get a B from you, Trace. I got an A. That's good. So,
oh yeah,
there's a lot of people at Marshall would give me a B for losing those 3 national championship games. But
hey,
we definitely should have done better. But I tell you, the first in 1993. We always deferred. That was our deal. If we won the toss at most places, at Oklahoma, we deferred. But at Marshall, we always took the ball because we were such an offensive team. Yeah. But our defensive staff said, "Look, Youngstown can't score if we leave the field. So they're not very good on offense. This is not near as good an offensive team, and we don't need to. We need to go on and if we win the toss, we need to defer. We'll stop them, and then we'll get the ball and all that. And you won't have to worry about the nerves on offense." So against my better wishes and everything, we decided to defer. We kick off. It's 3rd and 8, and they throw a 62-yard touchdown pass. And they go up 7-0. We go out there and run 3 plays, and we punt. The only punt we had blocked the whole time I was at Marshall. We punt, and they block the punt and go down and miss the extra point. They're ahead 13-0 with 12 minutes to go in the first quarter. And we get down the goal line, can't score. We get them to safety and all. We didn't even score a touchdown that day. We kicked the field goal. I think they ended up beating us 15-5 or something. But poor job by me right there. We lost the game when we deferred.
You think that was the difference, huh?
Always take the ball.
Hold that against me there. I was bad. Only time I went against my better thought there, but bad decision. And I'm going to see that coach tomorrow night at the wedding, and I'm going to remind him of that.
Yeah, bring that back up for sure.
Hey, I'm telling you, Coach. Oh, go ahead, Trace.
Go ahead.
Okay. All that we have to complain about as Marshall fans with your tenure here is that we didn't win as many national championships.
Right.
We're living pretty good. I'm just being honest with you.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, OU, the year we lost to Miami, we fumbled 2 punts inside the 10. They had Vinny Testaverde and Michael Irvin and all that. And Todd was only 12 years old at the time. And this is 1987. And I told him before the game, I said, do not, no matter what, look down at their team during warm-ups. Because you're going to come up in here and start saying, "Oh, you should see Jerome Brown. You should see." I mean, I don't want to hear how good these kids look and everything. So, but, we only lost 3 games in 3 years at Oklahoma, and all 3 were to Miami. The first year, Troy Aikman broke his leg, and we had to go to the wishbone, and the rest is history. But it was a good run there too. But I'm sure we could talk all night. But and from my perspective, I hope I hadn't kept you over too long. But I want to get this across to the Herd fan. I owe just about everything in my coaching career that I can think about being around people and being in life and everything to people in Huntington and Marshall University. I owe them so much. It's just I can't even get it across.
Well, I mean, again, I know we said it a couple times already, but we cannot thank you, cannot put into words enough how appreciative we are of all that you did for Marshall. And I mean, and us personally coming on here, reaching out to come on the podcast. I mean, we just had A+++ conversation.
Yeah,
that
was good. We had to get, and you guys are easy to talk to, and you do a good job of teeing me up. So we could, but I'm gonna look forward to hearing some more. I'm gonna be a good subscriber to your account and listen to you and keep up the good work and pulling hard for the herd to get it going this year. I got an extra interest there with Brad being back, and hope that they can get it rolling. And I'm sure, it's always a transition when you take over a job, and hopefully, I meant to mention Coach Holliday, who I thought did a really good job too after Coach Snyder, and there's been some really good coaches there without question.
No doubt about it. And I'm glad you said that earlier about coming back on here, because we would absolutely love to have you back on, like for sure. At some point, we're going to make it happen.
Anytime, I'll be here. So, y'all, last thing I'll say is go Herd.
Go Herd, Coach. We appreciate you, and we will talk to you soon, hopefully, and we'll get it set back up sometime. And we thank you again for coming on. Go Herd.